Good evening. Welcome to the Nightcap News. I'm Liz Sissio. Thank you so much for being here. Again, this is week 3, and this week's episode is titled Snips and Snails and Puppy Dog Tales. And we're going to be talking about how the media has really broken trust with the American people, right? Which is something that left or right, we all know. And it gave Donald Trump room to make a lot of pretty incredible claims about the media. Before we get to that, a little bit of news about the news. Before I got so convinced of the cleverness of me, like I do, that when I named the Nightcap News, it never occurred to me to look it up. And I should have. I should have typed it into YouTube. If I had, I would have seen that there's about a half a dozen other shows also called the Nightcap News in similar ways. And some of them spelled it a little differently than me, and some of them handled it differently than I did. That's individualism. Awesome. But it made me really uncomfortable, and I don't want to be stepping on somebody else's territory. So I'm once again open for suggestions. We may have to do a little bit of rebranding. Okay. So that's all on that. I did want to cover a couple of headlines today, as opposed to going straight into our main story. So, in case you missed it, this morning Glenn Youngkin was sworn in as Virginia's governor. Glenn Youngkin is a Republican, so we have a Republican governor of Virginia again. He's taking over for Terry McAuliffe. In Colleyville, Texas, a man has taken hostages at a synagogue. That's an ongoing situation. Out of 4 hostages initially taken, 1 has been released, so he has 3 hostages. That's at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. The big news in the news this week is that several members of the Oath Keepers, that is a right-wing militia group, were actually charged with sedition and conspiracy. Those are big charges. We don't throw those charges around nearly as often as average citizens think we should. Okay. You hear people say all the time, well, they should be charged with treason for things that are not legally treason. Not even close, doesn't come anywhere near our standard for legal treason. Sedition doesn't have to meet the same high bar as treason, but it's still a pretty high bar, and it's not the kind of charge that a prosecutor brings unless they've already got that dead to rights. So that was for several members of the Oath Keepers militia group, and that includes the leader. He will, I'm sure, be front and center and kind of the face of that whole thing. Andrew Edward, formerly Prince Andrew of England, has been stripped of all of his royal titles, all of his military titles. And I'm curious about that a little bit, because I'm pretty sure that now leaves him open for extradition to the U.S., which would be just unprecedented. A U.S. royal being tried in the a UK royal being tried in the United States. That would be truly unprecedented. As far as a criminal trial, I don't think there is one. However, a U.S. civil suit against him for sexual abuse in relation to his association with Jeffrey Epstein will proceed. And then also, again, if you missed it, big news this morning, an underwater volcano erupted just off the coast of Tonga. And so there are tsunami warnings in effect for California, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, parts of British Columbia, up and down the coast here on the West Coast. And obviously, there are going to be other Pacific islands that may need assistance, of course, because tsunamis cause a lot of damage. Okay. So that's the headlines, and I guess that brings me to me ripping off the fantastic Seth Meyers in order to do my best impression of John Oliver. So our main story tonight concerns the media, why you love them and why you hate them. And that's true. That is the main story tonight. And we're going to start by talking about somebody we all wish we could stop talking about, which is Donald Trump. Donald Trump said on more than one occasion, he called the enemy of the people. He called the media the enemy of the people. He loved to throw around the word fake news. And this is just so fraught with irony because in the meantime, there's a legitimate problem with fake news in the country. Headlines run all the time, and networks will pick up a headline that looks juicy, and they'll go with it, and then all of a sudden, just a couple of days later, we gotta walk that back. That's not what really happened there, or worse, they don't walk it back. An example of this happened in tech news not that long ago. Big claim went out. We created a stable warp bubble. And sci-fi geeks everywhere went, yes! And a lot of media outlets ran with that headline. We created a stable warp bubble. Except that no, we didn't. We didn't at all. We weren't trying to create a stable warp bubble. The man who made the claim sort of notoriously extrapolates and says kind of big groundbreaking sorts of things, and then when you go and you look at the actual evidence, well, that's not really what happened. So did the media go out of their way to go, oh, hey guys, we didn't create a stable warp bubble? A few did run a retraction headline. A couple were like, hey, not so fast. But a lot of the media just moved on to the next day's stories like, oh, nothing to see here. We didn't get that wrong. So we have lost a lot of faith. Americans have lost a lot of faith in our institutions. This is truly dangerous for democracy. There is not a single institution in the United States today that can claim to have the full faith of the American people. Not the medical industry, certainly not. Not the media, certainly not the media. Not the police, not the courts. We don't have an institution in the country that is working as designed or intended. Not one. The most dangerous of these is the breakdown of trust between Americans and the media. Americans and their relationship to the news has deteriorated to a legitimately dangerous point. I don't know how many of you guys are aware of the phrase the fourth establishment, but it's a pretty important phrase in the world of news. And I'm going to read it here. The fourth estate, excuse me, not the fourth establishment. The term the fourth estate or fourth power refers to the press and the news media, both in explicit capacity of advocacy and implicit ability to frame political issues. The The term is derived from the traditional European concept of the three estates of the realm: the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. The equivalent term fourth power is somewhat uncommon in English, but is used in many European languages to refer to the government's separations of power: legislative, executive, and judicial. Well, that doesn't explain it very well. I was trying to use the wiki here. Um, so the fourth estate is supposed to be what keeps government honest. If we have honest reporters and honest politicians, and the honest reporters are honestly reporting on what the honest politicians are doing, no problem. Everybody goes to sleep watching the news. And that is probably exactly what happened. That may be where things went wrong. We hit a period in American history where nobody turned on. Do you guys remember flipping through back when we all still watched regular cable? You remember flipping through, and there was always the channel with the blue screen and some very boring guy in a suit and tie droning on and on about tax deficits and things nobody cared about, and you just flip right through that channel, right? We got so complacent. Our parents trusted their government. Okay, my parents trusted their government. There were a lot of people in my parents' generation and their parents' generation who believed that the US government were the good guys. And because they believed that they were the good guys, they didn't really worry about all that talk. That's just politicians talking. They're just working stuff out. There was trust that the politicians were going to do what they were going to do. The news was going to tell us the truth. And everybody, well, not everybody, but a lot of people, too many people, fell asleep at the wheel. And then things began to change. I'm not sure when people woke up and started paying attention to politics again, but my guess would be sometime during George W. Bush. He was an incredibly unpopular president, and young people started paying attention sort of in an unprecedented way. If for no other reason than young people, and I was a young person back then, we like to be mad about stuff, and what's better to be mad at than the man? So George W. Bush got us into a war that was really unpopular. And we, got involved, particularly in the early chat room flame days. We suddenly started having this conversation with our peers in a way we'd really never had it before. The internet began to drive interest in politics. I remember when there were corners of the internet where no political conversations would happen at all. And now a Facebook group on knitting has to explicitly post no politics, because it comes up in crochet circle now. And that can be annoying, but on the other hand, that's probably a good thing. We're way, way more engaged in the political process than our grandparents and our parents tended to be. Like when we get down to the daily minutia, how does the Electoral College work? What are these voting bills that are passing? How is gerrymandering working? We understand and are involved in that process in a way that I don't remember my parents or my friends' parents ever being involved like that. So we stopped going to sleep, but the news started to capitalize on our renewed interest in the political process in a way that they had never been able to capitalize on it before. The internet also did a lot to change how Americans receive their news and how they consume their news. And this brings us to the first thing I think that the media did post-internet that really destroyed our trust. And that was that they started writing outrageous headlines. And by outrageous headlines, I mean headlines that used outrageous language whose sole purpose was to hit your outrage button. They did what? He said what? That's the only button they want you to hit. They want you to click that like button. You are far, far more likely to click on a headline if it offends you. And so, more and more, the headlines and the framing of the news becomes increasingly sensationalized in order to get you, the American consumer, to click on that headline so that the advertisers can make money for the site. And it has stopped mattering to most of these pundits how actually true the headline reads. So much so that there's a constant warning on the internet. Don't just read the headlines. You have to click on the article. You have to read the whole article. I post articles on Facebook, and one of the first things I'll say is, okay, the headline here is really misleading. I shouldn't have to say that. I shouldn't have to post that once. I post that several times a year. So, anyway, I have to have my coffee here. This was a Christmas gift, my awesome Spock mug, by the way. And I would just very, very much like to thank the person once again, my dear friend Kayla, for knowing me so well. Okay. And so then we get to this irony in the news, which is that the news has started reporting on what a terrible job the news is doing. This is hysterical. It's not just Donald Trump going out there screaming, fake news, fake news. It's also people in the news. Tucker Carlson will talk about the terrible mainstream media news as if he's not mainstream media news. He is the number one most watched news program in the United States. I think Rachel Maddow is number 2. And don't get me wrong, I like Rachel Maddow, but she's just a spin doctor for the other side. Now, in my opinion, she's a spin doctor for the side of rationale and reason and all of that. Okay, but it doesn't change what she is. She runs one set of propaganda, and Tucker Carlson runs a different set of propaganda. And together, they are just running entertainment news. They may tell you some facts. Those facts are likely to be heavily couched in a specific framing to lead you to a specific opinion. We know that some of the news is fake. The question is the news the legitimate enemy of the people, as the right would have you believe? Or is it the thin line that stands between us and holding our government accountable, which is what the news would like you to believe they're doing? Well, the truth is it's neither. The news is another money-making corporation with a product that they are selling you. And it has less and less to do with what is actually going on in the world and giving you information about what is going on in the world, and more about telling you how to feel and what to think about what is going on in the world. And so tonight, I would like to encourage you to watch the politicians lie for yourself. Go watch the channel with the blue screen. They still do that. It's public access television, meaning even if you don't have cable, chances are good you're going to get the channel where the secretary of some department you've never heard of rambles on endlessly about things you don't care about. But there's a reason you need to watch these people directly. And it's the same reason that you need to read history directly from the letters and the source material from which historians form their opinions. Because if you're reading what somebody else said, if you are watching what somebody else said about the news, then the framing is the framing that they already chose for you. And none of these major news networks, not MSNBC, not CNN, not Fox News, not even TYT, none of them are interested in just telling you the news. They are all interested in selling you a perspective. It is what they do. They sell you a perspective. Their product is their opinion. Local newspapers have suffered for this. Everything about the way we have consumed the news recently has become commercialized. There are very few news programs that you can turn on to just see the daily headlines. I am not selling, I'm giving, but at the moment, I intend to sell my opinion. Okay? Same as the rest of them. Just in case anybody's confused about this here. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite. I'm pointing out that the news is the news and opinion is opinion. And we have a huge problem in this country with having conflagrated the two. So now Americans don't trust the news. And of course they don't trust the news because it's not actually just news anymore. How could they trust it? In, I want to say it was 1998. And I could be wrong about this. So I'm just going to type it in. It's funny how well Google works. Okay, 1990, excuse me. On October 10th in 1990, a girl who simply went by the name Naira, I apologize. A girl by the name of Naira gave testimony to Congress in which she described horrendous acts of human rights abuses in Kuwait. And the entire testimony, every minute of it, in fact, her entire identity was a lie. She was presented as a refugee from Kuwait. In actuality, she was the daughter of the Saudi ambassador. The news didn't question the government during this testimony. They didn't pry into Naira. The official story was that because she was a refugee and a volunteer, they couldn't give her last name because her life would be in danger. But that was a lie. The egregious thing was not necessarily that the news media, like everybody else, fell for that lie, hook, line, and sinker. The egregious thing is that after it was discovered, they basically covered it all up. They made it all go away. Nobody wanted to take responsibility for the fact that American opinion about going to war in the Middle East was 100% predicated on a widely televised testimony that was, beginning to end, top to bottom, completely false. I was a child in 1990 when that happened. Oh, I was, let's see, I was 10. Yeah, I was 10 years old when that happened. It launched a campaign of action in the Middle East that goes on to this very day. And it was all done for completely economic reasons. The Gulf War was an economic adventure into better oil prices, right? And the American people at the time, in 1999 or in 1990, we were still fed up with Vietnam. We had this sensation that in no way, shape, or form were we going to allow ourselves to get drug into another endless, half-declared war with questionable reasons. And that just didn't suit the CIA at all. That just didn't suit the government at all. And so they drummed up Naira. They fabricated that testimony. And the news media happily helped them wag the dog. So are there any other cases like this? The Naira case was barely known in its time. Later, it became the poster child case. You can actually just type in the words "girl lies to Congress," and it will be the first story that comes up. The very first story that comes up. And you can find lengthy discussions these days on the news role in that. In fact, there's a great report by Amy Goodman on NPR about specifically that. Thank you, Fred Eater, for this excellent comment. Journalism is the only way we will know what our leaders are doing. Responsible journalism is rare but essential. Absolutely. And it is becoming more and more rare. If you want to find real journalism, you're not going to find it on the internet or on TV, as far as I know. Maybe that one channel. You're going to find it in your local paper. And I could do a dozen episodes on the economics of local newspapers and why they are so important to holding our communities together, holding local politicians accountable. We could spend weeks on that alone. But I went ahead and I looked up to find out if there were any other cases other than the Naira case of wagging the dog. And it's kind of funny because if you type in "wag the dog" into the Google search, and look up where it's from, the phrase actually goes way, way back. It's an old political phrase. But of course, the movie "Wag the Dog" comes up, and I found this just weirdly ironic. The movie "Wag the Dog" came out, and just days later, the Lewinsky scandal broke. Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. I'm sorry, I shouldn't call that the Lewinsky scandal. That poor woman has suffered enough. No, that's the Clinton scandal. The Clinton sexual abuse scandal broke. And what did Clinton do? He almost immediately, just days after that, he attempted to, I think he did bomb Bosnia and Serbia. And then later, as the election started ramping up, the next election cycle, he went ahead and bombed Yugoslavia because people were still talking about it. And the media let him do it. The media, rather than holding him to account, ran with these military action stories because Americans just love to play G.I. Joe. And the media loves to make money off of the way we tune into war unlike any other thing. So if we lost trust in the media, it's because the media abused our trust. Anarchy starts from the top down. I really considered whether or not I was going to mention this in this episode, but I think the next several episodes are going to be about how we've lost faith in our institutions. And I just want to say that we lost faith in our institutions because we are living in an effective anarchy already. We just don't know it yet. And the reason I say that is because anarchy always starts from the top down. When the people who make the law and the people who enforce the law are not actually following the law, when they are not held to account by the law, when the elites are allowed to do whatever they want, and the law only applies to some, then first of all, it's not really law anymore. And secondly, that's really where anarchy begins. And if you want to see the evidence for how much that is beginning to trickle through and infiltrate our society, really look no further than the, again, as we spoke about last week, codified corruption that is happening between the politicians and the news media. I hate to pick on the Cuomos here. They have had a terrible, terrible year, but they also have it coming. So here we go. Andrew Cuomo, hold on. I got to get these brothers' names right because I just realized I'm about to screw up which one is which. Okay, so Andrew Cuomo was the governor and his brother was Chris Cuomo. Right. Okay, Chris. Okay, so Andrew Cuomo gets all caught up in this, two scandals simultaneously. And one of them is salacious. And so it's the one he actually went down for. He didn't go down for the worst of the two. He went down for the more salacious of the two, because Americans do love our outrage headlines. Two scandals he gets caught up in. One has to do with the way he handled COVID in nursing homes. He allowed patients who had had COVID to be sent back into nursing homes, and a whole lot of people died. Because he did this. And then he covered it up. He tried to make it go away. At the same time, allegations were surfacing that he had been sexually inappropriate with staffers and other women who had been in his general vicinity. And his brother, Chris Cuomo, gets on the air and gives a big old song and dance about the ethics of reporting on his brother's scandal. It should be somewhat disturbing in the first place that we have a governor of New York and that his brother is a major network news pundit. And why should that be bothersome? Because the only reason that situation was allowed to brew is because the wealth and the power is concentrated in such a small group of people that we've just got families running the whole thing now. We had the Clintons, as in more than one Clinton. We had the Bushes, as in more than one Bush. We had the Cuomos, as in more than one Cuomo. And yes, one of them wasn't in government, but one of them was supposed to be in the position of holding government, his own brother even, accountable. And did he do that? No, he didn't. In fact, he was let go because he did the opposite. He tried to use his power in the media, and the media shouldn't have this kind of power, but he tried to use his power in the media to reframe the conversation, to dig up dirt on the accuser. I'm assuming so that he could run a smear and intimidation campaign. He didn't get that far. He got fired. Yeah, absolutely. John Harbeck, regular commenter, thank you so much for being here again tonight. Here's to hoping we don't get the Trumps. And yeah, so look, people can get angry with me all they want. I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton in 2016. I am not remotely ashamed of that. I did vote. I did not vote for Bernie. I did not vote for Trump. And I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I did vote. I also didn't vote for Mickey Mouse. I voted for a legitimate candidate on the ballot. I didn't vote for Clinton for the reason I just gave above. I am hugely concerned about the emerging corporate aristocracy in the United States. I don't want family politics. I wouldn't have voted for Jackie Onassis Kennedy. I wouldn't have voted for Bobby Kennedy. I won't vote for Ivanka Trump. And not just because I may have political disagreements with those people. I wouldn't vote for them if I agreed with every word coming out of their mouth. Because we are in the process of de facto creating an aristocracy in everything but name. And the news media chooses to ignore that also. The news media chooses to not report on numbers and facts that we need to know about things going on all over the world, and instead take up a huge amount of your airtime going on about Mr. Potato Head and woke culture and the cancel culture and culture wars, none of which has anything to do with the legislative actions being taken or not taken. When they're reporting on the legislators at all, it's to report on their infighting. And this is damaging us more in just that they're filling what should be your news and information time with just total fluff. But the politicians get to fill their space, their time that they should be spending legislating, with creating that fluff for you. It becomes this wonderful self-aggrandizing cycle that both parties get to go through. Politicians say outrageous things. The media goes and runs and reports on the outrageous thing that the politician says. Now that gets some media coverage. That gets some donors. That gets some money. The money's flowing. The ratings go up. So are we going to spend next week legislating? Of course not. We've got to outdo each other. We got to outdo last week's outrageous thing. We got to say something more outrageous this week. This is the fall of late stage capitalism. We are absolutely fully engaged. And I got to give credit here to my boss. I'm just straight ripping off something he said to me a couple of weeks ago. We are fully engaged in the consume, take, get what we can. The rich are doing it. They know. They know that the country is on the skids. They're just going to try to run with as much as they can while they can. So what do we do about it? We can define problems all we want. We can agree on them. And in the case of the media, people largely agree, okay? Left, right, center. We all know that the news regularly gets away with reporting less than entirely accurately, couching everything in opinion. Tucker Carlson gets on his show nightly, and yes, he sometimes lies. He's actually really good at framing things in a way that is not a lie. It's just designed to mislead you. Okay, you can tell the truth every step of the way and still mislead somebody. And Tucker Carlson is an absolute master of how to say true things in a way that will absolutely mislead people. But he's not the only one, right? Just to give you an idea of how much these people are allowed to mislead. If you look in the fine print, it will specifically say this show is for entertainment purposes only. Tucker Carlson got called out, sued for lies he was telling. And his lawyers went to court. Fox News sent their lawyers to court. They have lots of fancy lawyers. And the lawyers' argument was this: that no reasonable person could watch Tucker's show and conclude that what he was saying was factual. That's right. The lawyers know he's lying. Fox News knows he's misrepresenting the truth. They don't even deny it in court. They're saying, but it's an entertainment program. We don't have to tell the truth. And besides which, no reasonable person could possibly believe that this was actually the truth. Reasonable people don't think that badly. When your own lawyer has to go to the court and defend your outrageous statements by going, yes, they're outrageous, but they're so outrageous that rational people couldn't possibly believe them. And then you go on and you talk about how the media is lying to people. If you go on my Facebook page, this is Liz Ciccio on Facebook, you'll actually see a segment that I posted from YouTube, which is Tucker Carlson talking about, he says something to the effect of, imagine you had to go on air and lie to people night after night after night. And I'm like, from a guy whose lawyer had to go to court and say, well, yeah, he's lying to people night after night, but nobody believes him, so it's okay. Maybe your criticism, Mr. Carlson, of the media is not standing on the firmest foundation there either. And they're all doing it. TY2 will endlessly talk about the media and how the media is not being honest with you. Oh, you'll never hear the mainstream media talk about this, they say. Rachel Maddow will talk about the media's role in shaping politics, even while she's participating in shaping politics with her role in the media. Tucker Carlson, same thing. Sean Hannity, same thing. Chris Matthews, same thing. They're all doing it. They all run clickbait headlines. And it's all because the product is ideas and you're the consumer and it's all for sale and it's got nothing to do with real journalism. Real journalism is me telling you that there's a current hostage situation. It is ongoing right now in Colleyville, Texas. A man has taken hostages in a synagogue. I can't tell you a whole lot more than that because I don't have a whole lot more than that. We have some speculation, but it is speculative. And so I'm not even going to pass on speculation. We don't know what's happening inside that building yet or why it's happening yet. I can tell you that it is an ongoing situation right now. Now, that is journalism. If I start talking about, oh, it might be related to, anti-Semitism or terrorism or white supremacy. I'm speculating. That is supposition. I haven't even read that. Okay, just to be clear, I don't have a shred of evidence to suggest any of those things. I know it's in a synagogue. That's it. That is journalism. That is reporting the news that is actually happening. Everything else is opinion, supposition, speculation, and framing. And it is not designed to give you the best information for you to go forward and make good choices. They're not talking about inflation in the stock market so that you can make better investing choices. They're talking about inflation in the stock market because they're trying to drum up an exciting election cycle. They want you to click on the news headlines for the upcoming midterms. That's the real reason. I have a lot of work to do to make this news program a news program. I specifically said news and commentary, and I really should just have it say commentary because that's what I'm doing. I do want to do the news. I think I'm going to have a team of people if I'm going to do the news, but I'm going to eventually, right? But I would just like to go right on the record right now and promise you that I'm not going to ever run outrageous headlines. My headlines are not going to believe, did you hear this awful thing that Karen did? Marjorie Taylor Greene is the latest Nazi. I mean, I might think that, but I'm not going to run it as a headline. It's not going to be a part of the news program because that is not news. That is my opinion. What do we do about it? Well, there was a bill in the United States not all that long ago that actually there was a law that said that if you were on the nightly news, you had to tell the truth. And we got rid of that truth in news back in Reagan's day. I think it was Reagan got rid of that. We need to bring that back. I'm not the only person saying that, but it's become an imperative. People today believe everything from Antifa stormed the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, to they're putting vaccines in your salad. And they believe that because there is no longer a regulation that says that the people who come and talk to you in your nightly news are required to tell you the factual truth about anything. They're entertaining you. And their advertisers are just interested in making money. They're just interested in making money. They are not interested in informing you. They're interested in your market value. What will you buy next? What will you fear next? What will you go be an activist for next? What's the next news story that they can drum up to hand you so that they have time to sell you stuff? I don't see that trend slowing down anytime soon, but I do know that it is devastating for our democracy. Not just because the people can't make informed decisions if they're not getting facts that they know that they can trust, but also because it allows legitimate fascists to claim and appear to have ground to stand on that the media is your enemy. They will be able to take over newspapers, get rid of independent voices altogether if they can convince you that the media is all lying all the time and is therefore your enemy. That is something that fascists historically always do. Control the papers, control the message. And we're in a very precarious position here Because on the one hand, we believe in freedom of the press. We hold that at our very, very highest level. And on the other hand, we are allowing the spread of lies and misinformation to catch like rumor and wildfire. And people die at the end of that. Tucker Carlson is allowed to get on there and tell you misleading things about the virus, about January 6th, about vaccines, about masks. And people die because of his lies. Nyala was allowed to get in front of the Congress on national news and lie to the American people. And many, many thousands of people, possibly millions of people, have died for that lie. If we want to be the United States that is the shining example to the world of what representative democracy and diversity can do, then we must hold ourselves to the highest standards of integrity in journalism. Without it, democracy breaks down completely. A democratic republic, as ours is supposed to be, let's face it, we all know we're a functional anarchy living, or a functional or oligarchy living in an effective anarchy. But we're designed to be a democratic republic. And if we are ever going to be a democratic republic again, then we absolutely must hold our journalistic principles to our traditional standards. Who, what, when, where, why, how. And we can't equivocate on that. And I'm all for free speech. I'm all for people being allowed to shout their opinions from the rooftop. But that cannot be conflagrated with actual journalism. Doing so is dangerous to us, and it costs literal lives. So that was the main portion of the program tonight. I'm going to go over here actually and read some of these many, many comments I missed this evening. Well, I'd love to know where I put my glasses this time. Okay, we'll read them without my glasses on. That should be fun. Part of being a responsible journalist is correcting your mistakes, from Fred Eater. Absolutely. And if there's anything that drives me absolutely nuts about journalism, is that not only do these news programs very rarely go back and say, hey, we told you completely wrong. You remember 6 weeks ago when we said there wasn't going to be any concern about this? Oh, it turns out it's a huge concern. Do they do that? Do they take responsibility? From time to time, sure. Do they do it regularly? Can you count on them to own it? No. Also from Fred Eater, I liked Clinton until he went out of his way to insult our intelligence by saying it wasn't really sex. That's another thing that the journalists that the major news media is doing that really hurts us. Politicians are allowed to just say all kinds of massively ridiculous stuff. And then because a politician said it, journalists report on it as if it was serious, as if everybody should take this seriously because a very important person said it. And in fact, a lot of what our politicians, our representatives say is absolute nonsense. And the media would be best to not report it. If it wasn't going to legitimately affect policy tomorrow, don't give air to ridiculous ideas. John Harbeck, I think he's referring to Tucker Carlson here, but he's good for the shareholders. The fairness doctrine from Fred Eater. Yes, that's what it was. When I said truth and news, the fairness doctrine. I think that was it. Another issue, of course, with the news is both sidesing it. Apparently now we have to be neutral about Nazis. Oh, no, we don't. No, we don't. I'm fine being not neutral on the subject of Nazis. I don't have to give fascists respect. It's not a respectable position. National Socialism is not a respectable position that deserves a lot of air. They kind of destroyed their chances when they committed the last genocide. Maybe give it another couple of 100 years. Let go of the white hoods and the pseudo-religious doctrine. Maybe then we can talk. But no. We don't both sides genocide. Yeah? And the news needs to stop both sidesing issues that effectively have one side, a right side and a wrong side. There is truth, and then there's all the stuff you wish were true, but saying it doesn't necessarily make it so. And our politicians are getting away with pretending that isn't the case. Our news media is helping them. Together, they're just circle jerking. Okay. I'm not going to read that last comment because I try really, really hard not to promote violence, even against Nazis. I know. I should. Well, they promote violence against everybody else. I'm not sure two wrongs make a right. I'm just, they don't deserve air or space, and they can't be left to, rot in dark corners either. But I generally just don't promote violence, so we're not going to start with that tonight. Oh, and another great comment before we finish up here for the night from Fred Eater. Again, thank you so much. This is a fantastic observation. Trump was elected largely because he was sufficiently outrageous to generate the clickbait headlines that the media likes. And that's exactly it. The media created Trump. How many lives were lost because of that? Trump didn't stand a chance in hell prior to the media's absolute love affair. He said outrageous things. He did outrageous things. His rallies were so outrageous, you couldn't help but report on them. They created him. And people died because the media allowed the ridiculous, the unthinkable, the nonsensical to have the same air as a legitimate ideological battle that we were simultaneously having. So that's our show for tonight. Thank you again so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you guys being here. I am still working on making this a better show, and I am still super open to suggestions. I want to eventually have guests. I just don't know how to have anybody tune in and be on the screen with me, so I'll maybe look up tutorial videos or stuff. I'm trying to teach myself all this stuff, while I work and do other things. And in case I haven't mentioned it before, tech savviness is my very shortest pair of pants, okay? Those are my short shorts. And thank you, Fred, for being here. Thank you also, John. I love that you guys come on here and you comment every week and you help me out with that. I really appreciate you guys' participation. I will see you all next week. Hopefully we will cover more shows. Next week, we're going to talk about another institution that the Americans, another broken American institution. This one may surprise you. I'm going to go after the post office. Believe it or not, they got caught being a spy agency, the U.S. Post Office. And boy, this bothers me because 2.5 years ago, I was telling people that the only federal program that worked as it was designed and intended was the post office. And then DeJoy happened, and then they got caught being also a front for Homeland Security. So it turns out that wasn't even true. And I've got stuff to say about that. So anyway, next week we'll do our next episode. Again, on how the country is deteriorating, not in basements, not in pubs. It's not the working class that are the problem in this country. It's not our 37 to 40 million impoverished people that are creating the issue. It's not mental health. It's not even gun violence. It's the people at the top who think that the laws don't apply to them, but somehow should apply unevenly to all the rest of us. So again, until then, please be safe out there. Things are getting crazy. It is awfully cold. Do something kind for one another. Live long and prosper. Oh, I think that's a right-handed gesture. Live long and prosper. I love you all, and good night. And one of these days I'll figure out where that stop streaming button is without having to look ridiculous while I do it. Oh, there we go. Okay. There we go. Have a lovely evening.